What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Behind Enemy Lines, a Texas A&M football podcast. I am your host, Tony Catalina, and we got a big matchup to talk about. Obviously, you know by now it is Texas A&M versus the Miami Hurricanes in the first round of the college football playoff. The 7 seed Aggies will host the 10 seed Hurricanes at Kyle Field, 11 a.m. kick on Saturday, December 20th. Obviously, this is a big matchup. Obviously, huge implications. This is exactly what A&M and all these teams, all the 12 of these teams that got into the playoff field have gotten to this point. This is what it's all about right here. And when you look at this matchup, it's probably going to be one of the better matchups in the entire slate, especially the first round. And so, before we can talk about where could have A&M been, where they should have been, I'm, on record saying I thought they should have been at least the 6 seed. It felt like a drop from 3 to 7 was a big jump or a big slide, really, when you talk about what they've been able to do this season, starting 11-0, one loss to an arch rival in the final week of the regular season. That feels like a huge fall that probably isn't warranted, in my opinion. You look at Ole Miss and some of the turmoil that they got going on there. I thought A&M should have been a bump higher. I digress, though. Now at this point, it's all water under the bridge. Got to tee the football up, and you got to go and play football and win some games. So, with that, when you look at this matchup and really just diving into it, there's a lot of intriguing statistical things to look at. So, I just wanted to jump on and do A&M versus Miami by the numbers podcast. Just talk about exactly what I've seen in my studies, exactly what I've seen so far when I'm looking at the math and the numbers here, and it really is quite interesting if you look at it. And I just want to jump right into it, and we can kind of hammer it away. First off, one of the things that gets talked about all the time is strength of record and strength of schedule. And just when you look at the resumes of these two teams, or any of these teams really that were fighting for a spot, this is a conversation and a talking point that gets brought up a lot. And I think it's for good merit, right? I think it's for good reason here. When you look at the strength of record in the country, A&M had the third strength of record. That's top three in the country. Obviously, impressive record there. Miami wasn't too far behind. They were 14th. So a little bit of gap there. You understand that both these two teams are good football teams, right? They are good football teams. They do good things. But as far as the strength of record goes, A&M at third and Miami at 14. What's interesting, though, is, and this is where some of the conversation points get a little different when you look at different conferences and just how you feel about the strength of those conferences and what it's like to go against an ACC slate and what it is to go against an SEC slate. And this is where you kind of see the separation there, right? A&M strength of schedule was 16th in the country. Now A&M's getting a lot of slack because they played the bottom seven of the SEC. I don't know if I'm buying that. I don't know if I'm buying the fact that this is some slow or soft schedule. It's just not the case, in my opinion. Obviously, things shake out how they shake out. Obviously, things change. Texas was still a formidable team. Obviously, beat A&M. I think Florida had talent. I think Mississippi State had talent. I think Auburn had talent. A&M shouldn't get knocked for beating those teams. I think that those teams. Obviously, a lot of turmoil there and changes happen, but that's again not here or there now. But when you look at it overall, strength of schedule, A&M has the 16th ranked strength of schedule in the country. Miami, ACC foe, 45th, right? So how come the conversations, in my opinion, I'm unbiasedly here. I'm just talking about it, but in my opinion, how does the conversation about A&M schedule being weak, so to speak, and I do the air quotes with that, in Miami's conversation doesn't get brought up with them being 45th. Now, that's a huge gap in my opinion, right? You're playing the 16th, you got the 16th schedule of, strength of schedule there versus the 45th. And that's kind of where it kind of just separates, in my opinion. That's a talking point. Again, they're going to tee it up and they're going to play football and they're going to figure out who's the better football team between the lines. And all of these talking points will kind of go to the wayside. But leading up to it, it's worthy to have this conversation and kind of talk about what it could look like and what it could mean. Now, I want to dive some into the nitty gritty here, right? Let's talk big picture. Let's talk, granularly when we get to it. But big picture, scoring offense. A&M is 14th in the country in scoring offense, scoring 36.3 points a game. We know what A&M's offenses look like this year. We know what they look like when they're high octane and they're healthy and everyone's playing well. This is the team that can score 40 points on anybody. Now, they were held under 30 points twice this season. They scored 30 points in every other game, and that's Texas and that's Auburn. They went 1-1 in those two games. Now, when you look at it, Miami isn't far behind. They're 20th. They score 34.1 points per game. So you're talking about a 2.1 points per game difference between the two teams. And this is where you can kind of look at the schedule and you can look at the conferences and say how much value to put in it. Is it really a big gap? Is it not small? Like, do you look at the who A&M played in the SEC and say for them to score what they did versus Miami being slightly a little less and saying, hey, they play a softer ACC schedule. Again, that's pulling hairs. That's splitting hairs there. So I don't know about all that, but I will say A&M 14th, 36.3, and Miami 20th at 34.1. Interesting. Just something to look at, food for thought. Now, this is another, like you saw the way that the strength of schedule shakes out in A&M's favor to say like this looks like there's a big difference there. Defensively, that looks to be the case in Miami's favor. A&M is 41st in the country in scoring defense, allowing 21.9 points per game. Miami's top 10, they're sixth at 13.8 points per game. Impressive, right? If you're holding teams under 14 points a game, that is impressive. Now, that is something that A&M is well aware of. I'm not breaking news to them. This is a defense that has playmakers. This is a defense that can get after the quarterback. This is a defense that can take the ball away. It's just really fascinating to see the two differences of the play styles of how these two teams won football games, right? Because clearly, when you look at these statistics, Miami's defense has been the pillar of this program. Now they got Carson Beck and they got some weapons on offense, but when you look at this and you say, oh, they're sixth in scoring defense, that's a top 10 scoring defense. That's a team that's going to be able to be in the fight in any game, really. So for sit there and be 10-2, have that type of defense, that is super impressive. Now, circling back to where some of the similarities are, they both struggle in penalties, right? Penalties and hurt, shooting themselves in the foot and making mistakes that cost yourself moments, drives, games, whatever the case may be. Both these teams have had their issues with it. A&M is slightly better than Miami, which obviously is an advantage to Miami to A&M here. A&M is 118th in the country with 7.5 penalties per game. Just below them is Miami at 123rd with 7.58. So just a little worse, just a small smidge. They're both about 7.5, 7.6 penalties per game. Now, that probably means the flags are going to be flying in that first game, and whoever can play the cleanest football is going to end up, in my opinion, having an advantage and possibly win this football game. So you always say that, right? You got to protect the football and you got to not, hurt yourself, get yourself behind the chains. So looking at that, I thought that was a really interesting. So this is two teams in the top 12 in the country, obviously in the college football playoff, finding a way to get in the game, into the fight here, and they're both a really penalized football team. So interesting, something to watch for. It could be messy. We'll see what the nerves play. We'll see how they look early on, early kickoff. The 11 a.m. kickoff is always an interesting window. I don't think that anybody will have to be, got to get lifted up. This is a playoff game. This is something that's going to have natural juice to it. But is it too much juice? Does the early kickoff affect anybody? It's just something I'll be keeping an eye on. I'm sure, other people may be interested in that as well. Moving forward over to the other side of the ball, or excuse me, staying on the offensive side of the ball, but other side of it is the rushing offense. This is where A&M has a distinct advantage, and it's really not that close. A&M is 25th in the country with 192.7 rushing yards per game. Miami's 77th, doing a clean 150 rushing yards per game. Now, I think it's clear when you look at the statistics, and I'm going to talk about, I'm going to get a little closer and do a little deeper dive here with Carson Beck and whatnot. A&M is clearly a more run forward football team. Miami likes to throw the football around, but if A&M is able to control the clock, run the football, potentially have Le'Veon Moss back. We had talked about his ability to potentially come back in the regular season. That never actually came to fruition, but now you sit here and say, can he be ready for the first round of the playoff game? Is this the moment when he gets back out in the field for A&M? Now, a healthy Le'Veon Moss and a fresh Le'Veon Moss is a true weapon. I mean, he is one of the best backs in the SEC. Getting him the football, a dozen times is going to be key for A&M moving forward. Now, That doesn't look to be like Miami's MO whatsoever. They'll run the football, but it doesn't seem to be their first choice, and it doesn't, by the numbers, it doesn't seem to be all that effective as well. Now, when you look at the QBs, right? Because I want to talk about the specific players. We had talked about the units. We had talked about some of those distinct offensive numbers and some of the intriguing notes there, in my opinion. I want to look at here and look at the QB comparison. Really, really quite close here. Carson Beck has 3,072 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, passes, and 10 interceptions. Marcel Reed has 2,932 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. The huge differentiator there, right? We're talking about 70 yards in passing, so very minimal to anything when it comes to the passing side of it. But Carson Beck, one rushing touchdown to Marcel Reed, six. So comparable passers, right? Turn the ball over just same amount of time through the air, have the same amount of touchdown passes, similar passing yards. You could say equivalency there, passers, pretty equal. I think the differentiator in A&M's favor here is the fact that Marcel Reed has the ability to get out, make plays with his legs, and Carson Beck just hasn't shown that ability. I believe he has 38 rushing yards on the season. So it's just something that is, when you're looking apples to apples, this is an advantage in A&M's favor, no doubt about it. Carson Beck, I will say, has the experience. Being at Georgia, being at Miami, he's played in some big games. I don't know if he'll be, afraid of the Kyle Field, you know, impact. It could be, right? Like Kyle Fields' fan base and the way they get after it is super impressive and it does affect teams. But Carson Beck has played in a lot of big games. I think as far as quarterbacks go who are ready for the moment, he's definitely one of those guys that should and could be ready for the moment there. Now, going to the wide receivers, I thought this was super interesting in my opinion. When you look at it, obviously freshman Malachi Tony has been the guy for Miami, been the absolute guy. 84 receptions, 970 yards, and seven touchdowns. Compare that to A&M, who is a little bit more of a spread attack. KC Concepcion has 57 receptions for 886 yards and nine touchdowns. So he's gotten, just about 30 less receptions than Tony. He's got just under 100 less yards, but he has two more touchdowns. So really kind of interesting in how they use that. And then I wanted to take a deeper dive because 84 receptions and 57 is a lot more on-ball production. But the stats aren't all that crazy different. Looking at Miami's number two receiver, Keelan Marion has 41 receptions, 557 yards, and one touchdown. Looking at A&M, Mario Craver has 52 receptions, 825 yards, and four touchdowns. So I think the key here, the key takeaway for me is Malachi Tony is that passing attack, right? They have guys who can make plays on the outside, and obviously, 41 receptions for 557 yards is nothing to sniff your nose at here. But I think A&M's 1A and 1B type of attack with Craver and KC Concepcion is a plus in their side of things. Obviously, there are other playmakers that can be involved for Miami, but interesting when you look at it on a purely, wide receiver comparison basis. Now, this is flipping to the other side of the ball here. Defensively, it's where it gets really intriguing. I already told you earlier that Miami has an advantage in a lot of these statistics, but the one that they actually don't, though, is with the pass rush and the sacks. A&M is first in the country, tied first in the country with Oklahoma with 41 sacks. Miami is 16th with 34, so not too far behind, but there are 15 teams or 15 spots in between them in that sense. Now, when you look at here, Cassius Howell leads the way, SEC leading 11 and a half sacks, with Dayon Hayes getting 4.5. Akeem Mesidor for Miami has seven, while Ruben Bain Jr. had 4.5. Now, Bain is getting a lot of first round hype, and he's a great talent, but the production just hasn't been there too high as far as sack numbers. A&M knows all that too well. Shamar Stewart last year, Nick Scourton last year didn't get home a ton last year, and both ended up being first and second round picks respectively. Now, this is a really formidable pass rush that can't get after the quarterback. A&M's offensive line is going to have to be on the P's and Q's, but I argue the same thing has to be said for Miami as well. So I think it's two defensive line groups that can really get after the quarterback. They've proven that statistically, and they'll just continue to go there. Now, when you look at this, This I thought was pretty interesting because the ball production for Miami is vastly better than A&M's. It's not even close. But the passing yards allowed, A&M was better. A&M is 21st in the country at 182.8 passing yards allowed. Miami is 30th with 190.9. So looking at that, you say, okay, A&M is better at defending the pass. That's great. You look at those numbers. But you look at Miami, they have two defensive backs who had four interceptions apiece this season. A&M doesn't have a single defensive back with an interception. Right? A&M has three interceptions total on the season. That includes a safety and a couple of linebackers. No cornerback has one. That's pretty bizarre. I mean, you look at the way Mike Elko's get talked about. Mike Elko's defense is the fact that he is exotic in his pass rushes. He's really makes things hard for offenses, but they just haven't been able to turn the football over. So, you know, Carson Beck has shown the ability or the detriment to turn the ball over in inopportune times. It's kind of just been something he's had to deal with. I don't know if it's fair or not, but it just feels like when there's a moment that there has been moments where you can have him and you can make plays. A&M hasn't proven to be able to do that yet this year. So does that change? I mean, I don't know if you could teach old dog new tricks here when it comes to the playoff. You kind of are what you are here, but you wonder how that's going to shake out in that matchup there. But just wanted to deep dive into that. I know there's a lot more numbers to talk about, and we're going to dive into that as the weeks go on before this game. Again, we're about 10 days or 11, 12 days out, and I'm recording this on Monday, the 8th. So a lot more content to come, a lot more to digest here, but just want to look at some of the numbers that really stood out for me. I'm curious to see what you guys think, see if there's any other numbers that stand out to you. But again, as always, I'm Tony Catalina from Behind Enemy Lines, the Texas A&M football podcast. I appreciate you guys taking the time, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.